Zombie Tech. Welcome to Zombie Tech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Addie.
He's Whisker.
And today, who have we got?
We've got Shannon McGuire, pen name Mira Grant, who has written quite possibly the awesomest book in, like, the last half century. It's and it's actually part of a trilogy called Newsflesh, which is fantastic. The first two books are out. The first one being Feed, and the second one Deadline, and the third one I believe is Blackout. Correct?
Yeah.
Excellent. And I think that one is coming out next year. And
Right.
I guess we'll start by asking what is a little synopsis about of these books. What for those who don't know it.
They're medical thrillers with zombies because I love the science of zombies, and the quickest way to knock me out of your zombie apocalypse is to have bad virology. So I wrote a very lengthy series of zombie novels to have an excuse to do good virology. They are about a world that is 20 years after the zombie apocalypse. Because we were prepared, we were ready, and when the dead rose, we said, no, thank you, this is our world. Unfortunately, things did not go back to normal. We are in what I call the post-zombie America for most of the books, although it was a worldwide phenomenon. Mm-hmm. The first book follows a team of bloggers as they accompany a presidential campaign, and then the second book kind of picks up in the aftermath of the inevitably unpleasant presidential campaign. They're about family, and they're about medicine, and they're about science, and the reaction that we have as a modern populace to fear.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and the metaphor, to everything that's going on in modern day society is just lovely. I like it.
Thank you.
Now, I found Feed originally when we were just at the bookstore, and just randomly picked it up and read the back cover, and I was like, oh, okay, this is going in the pile. And it was right when it came out, so it was just this sort of lucky thing. And waited the entire year for the next book to come out, and we finally just got around to go picking it up. And, of course, Addie steals the copy and demands that she gets to read the entire thing before the interview here, so I haven't had a chance to read it. But if anyone is going to spoil anything for me, I think I'm okay with the author herself spoiling it.
That's fair, but I generally try not to, because since both of you have read Feed, there are some things that happen in Feed that are more effective if you don't know they're coming. And that's been a bit of a problem for me discussing the later books in the series, because... Well, the status quo in Deadline kind of requires spoiling Feed. And if anyone's listening and really wants to know what it is, some kind soul set up a very thorough Wikipedia page for Feed. And I'm honored that Wikipedia thinks that this is relevant enough that they haven't deleted it. And at the same time, I just kind of cringed because there's a full plot synopsis, including the end of the book.
Oh, no.
I know. I was so happy. Even the reviewers, when the first reviews of the book were coming out, none of the reviewers spoiled it.
Yeah.
They were so good. I wanted to send cookies to every reviewer, good or bad. I didn't really care if they liked the book, but I wanted to send cookies to every reviewer that managed. Yeah, because I think it's something that it honestly surprised me as the author when that happened. I was like, what? No, that can't. Oh, I've been foreshadowing that for 300 pages. Well, crap.
Dang it.
Yeah, what do you do in a situation like that? I mean, it's great that there's a page for it, but, the Wikipedia style of doing a synopsis is just spoiled.
Yeah. I looked at it for a while, and my mom said, well, why don't you just go in and edit it, honey? And I said, because that's not how Wikipedia works, Mom. They would be upset. As the author, I'm not allowed. Oh, but thank you.
Gosh. Yeah, no, you can't. I can't even spoil it for Whisker. I mean, I think I tried reacting just to make Whisker a little jealous that I was reading Deadline. And he's like, no spoilers. None
Aw.
whatsoever. So I had to wait for him to get through. I think it was 500 some pages here.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. No, but it's fantastic.
You knocked it out in, what, 2 days?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was excellent.
Now,
Thank you.
I have to finish my Neil Stephenson book before I can get to it, though. So
Oh, yeah,
it'll
that's
be a
right.
little bit yet because he's wordy.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable, though.
So, why zombies?
So, I was a child of the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 1980s, horror was still considered something, even R-rated horror was still considered something that was appropriate for kids. And it's probably a good thing in the modern world that I don't have any children, because I grew up on this stuff and I think it's completely reasonable, and my sister won't let me babysit. And zombies were really big in 80s horror. You had Night of the Comet, you had Night of the Creeps, you had the whole Romero thing.
Mm-hmm.
People who had grown up on the EC comics and the DC House of Secrets, House of Mystery comics were really starting to mine all of the zombie stories in there. So I just kind of grew up on them. And they went away for about 20 years. There's a really long span of time where you'd get one zombie movie every 4 or 5 years, and it would sink like a rock.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Feed actually took me a year and a half to research and then almost 2 years to write. When I started it, we were not in the middle of a zombie renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole thing where zombies are everywhere was a surprise to me. Going,
Yeah.
oh my. So it was that I love them, and it was also that in this modern world, we've humanized almost all the monsters, which is kind of fascinating to me, because as humans, we're really good at dehumanizing each other and saying, oh, it's totally okay for me to hate Minnesota because
Yeah.
you're weird people who live in the snow. You're not like me. But I should love vampires because vampires are brooding and sad and they're just like me. So it gets harder and harder to just say, well, here are vampires, let's kill them. Vampires are bad. Well, no, vampires are sweet and sparkly and dating your teenage daughter. Here's werewolves, let's kill them. Werewolves are bad. No, werewolves are sad nurses who didn't really mean to wind up in the situation they're in. So zombies kind of become the one thing you can still kill with joyful impunity, and that you can set up to be whatever you need, without having people going, you can't do that. Vampires are our friends.
God, can you imagine when they romanticize zombies?
I don't know.
It's
We've done that, actually.
Yeah, it's happened.
We've made some
Zombie
sort
love
of,
songs?
yeah, music from zombies' points of view. So I don't know. Maybe we're part of the problem.
Well, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, I've written zombie love songs. I have an album called Red Roses and Dead Things that's all mad science and horror songs.
Awesome.
And one of the songs is all about how much I want to date a zombie. It's really distressing. What's even more distressing is people like the song. I don't think it's a problem. It's just still considered the minority.
Mm-hmm.
Things like I, Zombie, where your main character is a zombie. Diana Rowland's I Was a White Trash Zombie. Even Tim Wagoner's Matt Richter Private Eye series, which are about a self-willed zombie, they're cool because they're still in the minority. The humanization is still so early in that just having a zombie that doesn't want to eat you is unique. It's interesting.
A vegetarian zombie. Can you imagine?
Ooh.
That's ridiculous.
And then people would just make grains jokes all the time. Constantly. You would never get away from them.
Oh, man. That's great. So then, usually people, like with all the movies and even some of the zombie sites, it's always about, like, immediately surviving the immediate zombie apocalypse. And I found it fascinating that you decided to do it post-zombie apocalypse, so to speak. I mean, they're kind of sort of still in it, but, well, no, they are. But, why post as opposed to during?
Well, one, I really, and I am such a nerd, but I was in it for the science.
Okay.
You know, I love the science. During an outbreak, during an incident, you don't have time for that. There's a movie just came out this season. I kept telling people it was the romantic comedy of the year called Contagion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it. It was absolutely brilliant. It's porn for shonens. It's a fantastic movie. If you're looking for strong characters or continuous plot, it's a terrible film. You're going to hate it because there's not time for that. They're focusing on the science during an outbreak. Right. If I really wrote a zombie apocalypse during the apocalypse part, that is what it would read like. It would be all these people sitting in labs, locked up in the CDC going, I think the R naught of the zombie virus is everyone you've bitten. Ah. Everybody does that. It's everywhere. And at the end of the day, the difference between a really solid good science zombie apocalypse and so a magical comet fell from the sky and it landed on the nuclear power plant and then there were bugs zombie apocalypse, that doesn't come out until after you know whether you have survivors or not. It doesn't come out until there's time to go into the lab and start working again.
Very true.
So I wanted to play with that.
And you mentioned, like a whole bunch of your interviews have mentioned that you have the CDC on speed dial.
Yeah.
How true is this, one? And two, how did you posit this question to your CDC contacts?
It's actually quite true. I have a couple of different numbers at the CDC in my phone. I don't have a speed dial as such anymore because I have this weird little phone that doesn't believe in speed dial. It believes in contact lists.
Yeah.
But I called the CDC and basically said, hi, I'm an author, which is the best opening phrase ever. Hi, I'm an author can open so many weird doors. And said, hi, I'm an author and I'm looking for someone to talk to about virology. The nice thing about doing anything where you want your science to be solid is that so many people don't care that when you contact the people who this is their life, the science of this is their life, and say, I really care about getting it right, you're the best thing ever. Yep. They want to talk to you. They're happy to. I did initially have some problems getting someone to talk to me because I'd like to raise the dead is kind of a Herbert West question and not a serious literary question. So I wound up calling various different offices and talking to various different people. And I called one of the offices and said, hi, my name's Shannon McGuire. I'm an author. I'd really like to. Wait, are you the Black Death girl? Yes. No, you're not. And I wound up getting stuck on speakerphone by a receptionist at the CDC who made me sing a song I wrote called The Black Death, which was about the epidemiological anthropology behind the origins of the Black Death in Europe, arguing the hemorrhagic fever theory of disease rather than the standard bubonic plague. And so I'm singing a cappella at the poor CDC, and they're like, oh my God, it's the Black Death girl! And then they let me talk to someone. Which just proves that being really a little odd is a good way to get what you want. And then as for positing the question, it took quite a while to put together a zombie virus that would actually work. And Kellis Amberley, I'm not going to say that we could make it tomorrow and raise the dead, but it is as close to a functional zombie virus as I could get. And I worked very hard. It took quite some time. And I would call my friend at the CDC who does not wish to lose his job. So I would call him and be like, so what if I took rabies and did this, and this? That won't work. Oh, okay. Call a week later. What if I took one of those viral cancers like the thylacines keep getting and did this, and this? Nope, that wouldn't work. Oh, okay. Call a week later. What if I took Marburg hemorrhagic fever and combined it with a standard coronavirus that had had its exterior hexahedron enhanced to give it a good protein bond hook? Don't do that. Okay! Done. And that was kind of how we got on the right track for the virus.
Stamp of approval. That's great. And, did you just read, biology textbooks just to figure out, Because I'm guessing you don't have a bio degree or...
Yeah, I read biology textbooks for fun.
That's awesome.
It makes me fun at dinner tables. I read a whole bunch of books on virology, and then I audited several virology courses at Stanford and UC Berkeley, which are both reasonably close to me.
Wow.
Just to listen to the lecturers, listen to what they were saying was interesting, what's upcoming, what they have potential treatments for. Like I was initially looking at Ebola because everyone's heard of Ebola.
Mm-hmm.
I had to explain to more than a few people that no, I did not make Marburg up because they'd just never heard of it before.
Right.
And I was looking at Ebola, and then I found out we actually have a possible Ebola treatment going into trials. We have something that might work to stop this. And I'm like, well, hell, that ruins my fun.
Right.
Sorry about all you people that would have melted without it. I don't mean to sulk, but fun ruined. And then a lot of it was calling experts and finding out which books to read. Because there are things that at this point I can't say, well, go read this book. It's really interesting. I had to read 17 books to get to where I could understand that book is really interesting.
Sure.
And that is also the danger of being a research nut, is that periodically one or more of my proofreaders would be like, wow, Shannon, I can tell from the passion that you're bringing to this sentence that it's a really interesting sentence. It's not in English. Even a little.
That's great. It's like a lot of the engineers that we talk to, because I'm a noob at electronics and engineering in general. Mm-hmm. And when I do the research, it's like, why are these engineers writing for engineers? I can't understand half the stuff they say. So I have to go back into like kindergarten speak to understand even half of a sentence.
Whereas I fully encourage such behavior. And if you want to go off onto literary rants that most people wouldn't understand, or virology rants in the same way, go ahead. Because nerdy people listen to this show.
That's good. Yeah, I read a lot of Robin Cook while I was writing Feed. Okay. Not because I'm really a big fan of Robin Cook. I liked his early work, and then he got a little weird. But because he's so good at writing medical terminology that my mother can understand.
Well,
and I love the nerdy people. I did all of my research and all of my work because they are my tribe, and I want them to read it and go, wow, that's cool, not, wow, you're high. But, I also did want people to be able to pick it up and read it and understand what I was getting at. Because there's kind of a point where obscurity, while it's awesome, cuts so many people out of the work that it just seems unnecessary to me.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think anybody reading, just picking up Feed, would not need like a biology degree to understand this. You did a fantastic job at it.
And coming from Addie, that's a medical professional seal of approval. Her day job as a nurse involves her explaining to lay people every single day in multiple languages medical details in a way that they can understand.
Yep. So.
Yeah, I was very grateful to Contagion for actually explaining what an R-naught is, because my HR department at work was really tired of me complaining about the R-naught of people that come to work while sick. And I'm like, I have charts. I've made charts. And they go, we don't care about your charts. You're not speaking English. And then they all saw Contagion and went, oh, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting that you chose bloggers, I think, because we're pretty much, I'm a blogger, essentially, of all things nerdy, and, I'm trying to think.
I think it's a really good, demographic to key off of, because so many people are now sort of, how would you say, kind of empowered in a publishing sense, where they wouldn't have been in, say, the 80s when these movies were popular. And that's one of the huge cultural differences between that period of time and this one. So tweaking that little thing and having those be your your hero people is, yeah, I mean, it's just right on the pulse.
Yeah, it was, I'm a blogger. I have been for a long time, and so are a lot of my friends. And you see both the good and the bad of this, because I am in a very odd position in terms of information wants to be free. I think that some information should absolutely not be free. It should be locked in a big box, and then we should bury the box. Like the crazy Australians who figured out how to make immunodepressant smallpox and then published their results.
Oh.
Great, thanks!
Awkward.
That information did not need to be free.
Awkward.
But so you see that even when we want to cover things up anymore, they can't be covered up. There are too many people there with their phones, with their blogs that are just ready to report it. And the nerds, of course, we embraced this first because it's a nerdy thing to do, and we have a great time with those. And I figured that with a zombie apocalypse, what you're going to get, because this is what you get every time that there's a pandemic, is a whole bunch of, we need to not freak people out. We need to not freak people out. Let's not say what's really going on until we know what's really going on. Oh, crap, it's really bad, and it's too late to tell them we've been lying to them without causing a bigger panic. Let's not say anything. Yay! But the bloggers don't have those constraints. The bloggers are going to be going, dude, zombies. That sucks. One thing that's been really interesting for me as almost a side note is, of course, the book did have about a 3.5-year gestation cycle, as it were, during which time Hurricane Katrina hit. And I actually did get to see in one of those you would never have wanted to have proof of concept moments. I got to see people doing exactly what I said they would do. You had the coordination of the disaster response. You had the people on the ground going, there is a wire down here. There is a nest of snakes here. And just the very solid, this is how we would react in a crisis. And then, of course, that kind of gestation cycle, you can't really predict what the tech is going to do. So I get about 1 or 2 angry emails a week from people telling me that I'm a Luddite because I didn't focus on Facebook or Twitter or something else that did not exist when the book was being written. And that's always kind of fun from a shake your head and go, oh, standpoint.
And really, those sort of things are so periodic. They come and go all the time. You know,
I mean, my bloggers are they're video bloggers, they're camera bloggers. They're not just sitting and writing into your live journal. And I do think that will eventually become the generic term for what we do.
Yeah, the era of distinction between vlogging and blogging, I think, is pretty much moot at this point. I mean, it doesn't really matter which side of that fence you're on.
Yeah.
So in the book itself, you have there are a lot of unpublished blogs of the characters and published blogs. Published being, well, obviously the public front, but with a lot of the unpublished blogs being the actual feelings, maybe even actual facts that the characters encounter. Now, since you're a blogger, do you find yourself having your own unpublished blogs and published ones, especially because you have, I mean, just an increasing fan base right now?
Sometimes, yeah. You do have the things that you lock more and more privately. And some of those are stuff that I just don't think I need to discuss with a really wide base. You know, I belong to Weight Watchers. I love my Weight Watchers leader. It's a fantastic organization. I don't think the majority of my fan base really wants to read my food logs.
I don't know, you might be surprised.
That's true, but I've been keeping them since 2002, so I'm not going to stop just because of that. I had issues about 2 months ago now where someone was sending death threats to my cats.
Oh my God.
Because I have cats from reputable breeders rather than cats from shelters, and this person felt that the appropriate way to show his support of animal rights was to threaten to come to my house and kill my cats so that I would understand the pain of the cats in shelters. And during that period of time, pretty much anything that had to do with my cats was very much locked down. It was either completely private or it was locked to a very small friend circle. And we also had a certain measure of I will now say really, really horrible things about the person that is sending me this mail that would not be appropriate to say in public, because I do try to play nicely with the other children in public, but you're threatening to kill my cats, and I hate you, and these are the many things I would like to see happen to you.
Right.
So that happens a bit. For the most part, I don't have quite as much really pressing reason to mark things private as my characters. I also don't have nearly their security. Like, they're on a server, the character I have in the books that did most of their computer tech, Georgette Messionaire, really is, she should have been working for the CIA. You know, she is intentionally, I had one person critique that she was clearly a super hacker with, you know, magical powers, and I'm like, no, I worked with this girl. I worked with the person she's based off of. And they do exist. You get these fluffy, happy little blonde girls that can code their way around the world. Right. And because of that, the characters don't need to worry so much if they put something up privately that it's going to get out.
Right.
Whereas I'm still on LiveJournal, most antique of the blogging platforms, but I have a permanent account. I've had it since the site opened. I love it there. And just last week, we had a security glitch where everybody's private entries were public for 3 hours.
Oh, crap.
It was awesome!
Oh my gosh.
The things that I really need to not have get out, like what happens in chapter 8 of the next book, I don't post anywhere. They are private because they live in my head.
Yeah, that's how I manage my private thoughts versus public. If I'm typing anything into a computer, I assume it's going to be public at some point.
Exactly. And that's scary. I mean, it's one of the scarier things for me about living today, because everyone assumes all information does want to be free, even the stuff that shouldn't be. We have things like, I am not a Stephanie Meyer fan, not opening that debate, but I'm not. And a couple years ago, one of her first drafts for a book that had not been published and now possibly never will be published got posted online.
Oh, no.
Someone got into her computer and put up one of her first drafts. My first drafts are not meant to be seen. They're not good. Like, they're not. I can make them good. That's what rewrites are for. But your first draft is get the words on the paper, get the shape of it so that you can start getting the good stuff. I would die if one of my first drafts got online. I would just die.
Yeah, I've heard authors talk about this process of the first iteration of any of these works is just huge compared to what it ends up being, because most of the process isn't about doing it in one finished piece. You just sort of open the fire hose and then get editors to help you just chop it down until it's something readable.
Yeah, well, and there are things that have to be written but don't have to be read. There's a whole chapter that wound up not being in feed. I needed to write a chapter to get the emotional states of the characters, to know where they were as people following some events. And then I read it and was like, wow, this kills the pacing, this kills the momentum. It was an important chapter to write, and now it is an important chapter to delete. The book would not have been as good if I hadn't written that chapter. It had to exist for the book to be correct.
So it had a life course of its own, really.
Exactly.
That's great.
And that's the exact sort of thing you hear from authors who have had more success, is they like to talk about how important it is to remove things before it becomes published. And that's always fascinating to me. I don't have any inspirations to be an author or anything like that, but the process is very interesting.
Stephen King says, kill your darlings. And honestly, he's right. If you can read a page that you've just written and say, wow, this one line is a shining gem. It's the most amazing thing ever. It's brilliant. Delete it. It needs to not be there. And that is sad. It is the worst feeling in the world to realize that you have to kill a darling now. But you do have to. That's what makes the story stronger.
One interesting thing in Feed, and I'm sure probably continues in Deadline, is you don't shy away from using technology as sort of a non-human character that's all around and interwoven into every aspect of it. For example, all of the security checkpoints and all the computer security and the technology that they use to do their blogging and all of that sort of thing. It's there, and it's there all the time. And I think that's really neat because that's what life is like these days. It's just interwoven into everything, and you can't get away with it, even get away from it, even if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's inevitable. I mean, my mother is not the most technical person in the world, and she has a phone that has more computing power than NASA had 20 years ago. Just her phone. She kills computers by looking at them, but seriously, I won't let her touch my computer anymore.
Sounds like my mom.
But she'd be lost without her phone, and the technology is not going to get any less intrusive. One of the more fascinating critiques I've had on Feed, and I appreciate it, although in this case I don't think there was anything I could have done about it, was someone's going, okay, I get it, there's lots of blood tests, whatever. And I just kind of had to go, you didn't notice the number of phones. Because it's your life that you have these phones all the time, you stopped counting them. You didn't notice that there was a phone on every page. But the blood tests are weird, so that's what you single out as being too present in the book. That's actually why it had to be too present in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's kind of the sort of the behind-the-scenes point. Exactly. That there's so damn many of them that it's sort of a comment on other things that are happening in the real world.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that made me happiest is I had a nurse practitioner write to me and go, you know, I was all set to be mad at you until I read a thing in book 2 where I realized that you did understand that this many needle pricks were a health hazard in and of themselves. And it's like, yeah, no, I know. They're security theater. It's not really keeping people safer. But if I tell you that the magic spell to not become a zombie involves me jamming a thumbtack into your thumb 7 times a day, you're going to get real used to letting me jam that thumbtack in there.
Yeah. And what's the real world equivalent that you got inspiration from for like a lot of your technology?
Well, a lot of the tech came from different places. The blood testing units actually are based on a combination of a seroconversion effect that you get during the early stages of a Marburg infection and the way that diabetes blood testing kits work.
Okay.
Because there is a point early on in infection by any hemorrhagic, but especially members of the Filoviridae family, where your seroconversion levels are causing a spike in blood sugar. And it can be detected by simple pH tests. So you would actually be able to use a modified diabetes test kit to find out if you had Marburg, by which point you would already be dead. But if what you're looking for is, has the Kellis-Amberley virus switched into a live state, since it's based so solidly on Marburg, it was a viable mechanism. And that was fun, and that made some friends of mine who are diabetic very happy because I asked them lots of questions about how their kits worked.
Right.
And then ignored most of their answers because we're 20 years in the future and Apple makes these things now, so they're very streamlined and cool. But I at least tried. They're very white. They're very pristine.
I thought it was an interesting choice to actually use a real company there. I remember noting that mentally when I read it. I was like, it's somewhat courageous for you to do that.
I used as many real companies as I could. The main reason not to use real companies is if you are going to defame them. And saying, hey, in the future, after the zombie apocalypse, Apple will make the most badass blood test kits out there is not actually defamation.
They're probably in production right now, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. The one I was worried about was actually Georgia and her Coke problem. Because she is a big Coke addict. She drinks that stuff like people breathe. But I was assured that, again, it's not defamation to say someone really likes Coke. There's no point where she starts having DTs because she can't have a Coke. There's no seizure from drinking too much. So we were good.
Right.
So I didn't mean to steer things too much away there.
That's okay.
Somebody gave me a cartoon to look at yesterday or the day before, and it sort of reminds me of what we were talking about here. It's this little cartoon of a bunch of monkeys standing around a ladder with a banana on the top of it. And it's talking about how some scientists had 5 of these monkeys in a room with a ladder and this banana, and if a monkey would climb up the ladder to try to get a banana, the rest of the monkeys would be sprayed with cold water. And very quickly they learned the connection, so if any one of the monkeys tried to go up the ladder, they would beat the crap out of them.
Well, yeah.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. They took one of the monkeys away and replaced it with one that had not been exposed to this facet of the experiment, the spraying part. And as soon as he goes up the ladder, the rest of them beat the crap out of him, right?
Right.
And then they slowly go through and they replace each monkey in turn until the monkeys that are there, none of them have been sprayed with water. Interesting part is they still beat the crap out of each other if anyone tries to climb the ladder, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
I think humans are like that.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we're all primates, and we're all boiled frogs together at this point. Well, have you heard about the frog boiling?
Can't say I have.
Okay. If you take 2 frogs, because you're going to kill your first frog. Actually, you're probably going to kill both frogs, so please don't do this, because I really like frogs. But if you take 2 frogs and 2 pots of water, and you set them both on your stove and turn one on and bring it up to a boil, and you drop your first frog into that pot of water, that frog is going to be out of that pot of water so fast. I mean, he is going to jump clear. He will still probably, suffer second-degree burns and die, which would make me sad.
Right.
But he will not get into the boiling water.
Sure.
If you take your second frog and you place him in your pot of cold water, which is also on the stove, he'll stay. He's a frog in a pot of water. He's a pretty happy dude. Turn the water on. He will stay in the water even as it gets warmer around him, because every change in temperature is the new norm.
Yeah.
And he will eventually boil to death.
That actually, I was just telling Whisker about crab. Maryland blue crab. I think that's how we cook them.
Yeah. They will not get out of the pot if you heat the water around them, because by the time they realize they're in danger, they don't know what to do. And people are a lot like that. It's where the phrase familiarity breeds contempt comes from. Once you change the environment dramatically enough, we lose the ability to understand that the environment used to be different. It all turns into nostalgia and, when I was a child, we did it this way. And I think that we're like the monkeys in that context. They changed the environment enough, we can tell it's been changed. We don't care. We
don't bother finding out why.
We don't bother finding out why. Well, you care.
I remember. I care. I want things to go back to like 1995-ish, and then we can redo this whole damn decade. Thanks.
That'd be cool. I would actually, I would be down with rewinding a little further if I remembered the modern day, not to make a killing on the stock market, but so that I could do something to poison the watershed in my hometown and keep the entire suburbanite movement from moving here, which is possibly the most selfish application of time travel technology I've come up with in a while. But it would still make me happy. Like, no, I'm sorry, you don't want to live here. We have mutant frogs. Go away.
So, the bloggers that you have in the book, we have the newsies, who report on fact, I guess, or
they report on the news.
The news,
and they. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
They kind of break down further. You have the factuals, who are very, very fact driven. That's just the fact. These are the facts. We considered calling them the Morrows, but decided that would be. We now have to explain even more weird news facts, and that just doesn't work for me. You have the Stewarts, who are much more about opinion and spin.
Okay.
Georgia, who's our protagonist in Feed, is a newsie. She's a factual newsie. Most of the blogs of hers that are in the book are actually her op-ed columns, which is why it says from the blog of, rather than citing a specific article title, as it occasionally will. And that's because I'm not a political reporter. So I actually am incapable of writing political articles at the level of skill that Georgia has gone to school to acquire. But that's just kind of what they do. They're all about the news. Georgia is specifically a factual, so she is specifically all about the facts and does not do shades of gray very well.
Gotcha, which I appreciate. And then we have the Irwins.
Yes.
So named, I'm guessing, after Steve Irwin.
I cried so much when he died.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate.
And they're the ones that basically go out and poke things with a stick.
Yep.
And I think, who is it? Sean.
Sean.
Yeah. Sean, Georgia's brother, was an Irwin, or is an Irwin. Irwin.
Yeah. Irwin.
And then we have the fictionals, who Buffy is, and she's like the head of them.
Yeah, she's their head fictional in the first. The head fictional of that specific site. There's no one who's in charge of an entire faction of the internet blogging world. It'd be fascinating. I mean, the elections alone would be amazing. But yeah, she's the head of their fictionals. She's also our crazy computer genius,
Yep.
Which was fun for me. And they're mostly the fanfic communities.
Okay.
They do fanfic or they do regular fic. There's poetry. There's an immense amount of porn coming out of the fiction. So much porn. Oceans of porn come out of the fictionals. And they're there because, in part, there's been a lot of stagnation in Hollywood. There's been a lot of stagnation in actual visual media because it's really hard to come up with anything anyone wants to buy that is set after the Rising. You no longer have universal appeal the way... There's no universal appeal even now, but you can come a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Everything is nostalgia. Everything is, let's remake that 80s movie that we remade 2 years ago again.
Interesting.
And so the fictionals kind of fill that in because they don't have to have nearly the scope of audience. The webcomic artists are also very much in the fictionals. And again, it's a matter of how big an audience do you personally need to make a living and to be happy.
I guess that's true. Now that you mention it, I don't recall any Hollywood mention actually in the books.
Yeah, they mention it's very offhand, but nothing's in production. No one's watching modern TV. You'll have Magdalene with her grindhouse movie parties and Buffy with her absolute obsession with pre-Rising television.
But that's still all pre-Rising.
Mm-hmm. It's really... No one wants to look at the world they live in, and it's very hard to make accurate media set post-Rising because zombies come toward the sound of other zombies moaning. So silent pictures kind of having a revival.
Oh, man. Can you imagine?
We made a really realistic movie about the zombie apocalypse. Then what happened? Everyone who watched it got eaten. Great. That's swell. I'm going to go watch Heathers again.
Oh, man. That's actually pretty smart. And which would you find yourself being?
If I were to suddenly have the zombie apocalypse from Feed kick off right now, I would find myself being someone's lunch. Because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area where there are far too many people and none of them have guns. We're a very strong gun control state, which is unfortunate when the zombie apocalypse begins.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, I were to be transported to a point where I had been born after the zombie apocalypse in Feed, I probably wouldn't be a blogger. I would actually be working for the EIS, which is the Epidemic Investigative Service. It's a branch of the CDC.
Brilliant.
They poke things. I wanted to go to work for them in the real world, but it's a very limiting career path, and girls are not encouraged to do well in math, or at least weren't when I was in school. So I wound up not having the math basis when I got to college. And that is one of the truly wish fulfillment idealistic things about this universe, is that sciences are so important now because everyone's looking for the cure that they don't discourage anyone from going into math or science on basis of gender. They discourage people from going into anything that involves going outside.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Wow. You're like brilliant.
Thank you.
It's really interesting
enlightening.
to talk to somebody who's more of a zombie expert than we are, because it's sort of our job to be the expert on most of these shows. And today we can just let the real captain steer.
That's brilliant. So, which city do you think will survive the zombie apocalypse?
I think that there is no specific city because you're going to have a lot of factors that come to play. Huntsville, Alabama is actually really well set up.
Wow.
Oh, it's brilliantly set up. It's small. You've got a military presence. You're right by NASA. A lot of folks do hunt, so you've got a lot of firearms. A lot of the houses are very well constructed because it's hurricane country. You know, they're constructed really solidly to not have big plate glass windows, to not have some of the things that'll be hazards. That said, I have friends in Huntsville. We just had some really nasty hurricanes come through there. You know, one of my friends is a doctor. He's a pediatrician that works in one of the Huntsville hospitals, and we were talking afterwards about some of the things he saw, and it was just heartbreaking and horrible. So if the zombie apocalypse corresponds with hurricane season, Huntsville is screwed.
Yeah.
They're just, I don't want to be there.
I get that.
I'm pretty much related to Warsaw County in Indiana, and I think they stand a really good chance. It's beautifully geographically set up. It's flat, which is going to matter. If you have the high ground, great. If the zombies have the high ground, bye-bye.
Run.
So, exactly. So flat is actually a really good starting equalizer. But again, you've got hurricane season, you've got inclement weather, you're going to have some issues.
Yeah.
I think the smaller towns in Oregon and Washington are going to be really well set up. Vancouver Island in Canada, not Vancouver itself, because Vancouver itself is too large. It kind of crosses that population threshold. But Vancouver Island, it's small. It's got an isolate population. There are people with guns because moose do come up into your yard sometimes. That's not fun for anybody.
No.
You know, so they'll stand a good shot. Stephen King wrote a story called Home Delivery, which was set in a Romero-style apocalypse, but was about a woman on a remote island in Maine getting ready to have her first child. And I think that he had a very solid point in that the small communities, the ones that have a good geographic isolation and a strong hunting policy so that you'll have lots of people that are armed against the zombies,
Right.
they're going to do better. And oddly, I think they will have an easier time dealing with that's not your mother anymore, because they all know each other so intimately and so well. Most of us in cities and suburbs, we don't really know our neighbors. We can't tell if our neighbor is drunk or dead. In a non-zombie apocalypse scenario, I'm very glad most people assume drunk. But once the dead start walking, you kind of have to be able to switch from drunk to dead. And I think that if you really know your neighbors, you know, you have a very strong familiarity with their behavior and you know the dead are rising, it'll be easier to make that step to, Carl's dead.
Yeah.
Get the grenades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of the really major cities, I think that Manhattan is toast.
Fair enough.
We're just losing India. India is unfortunately gone.
Yeah.
If it is a zoonotic zombie plague. If the animals can catch it, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please leave. Same with Hong Kong and Tokyo. London's going to hold out longer. London's going to hold out longer than some of the older places because they have very, very narrow stairways.
Oh, so you have a limiting factor.
You have a good limiting factor. They have very strong doors. There are still a lot of blast doors on the older buildings in London. And the buildings are close enough together that if you can jump, you'll be able to go roof to roof for large portions of the city. Zombies, not so big on the jumping. Real big on the plummeting.
You have clearly thought about this. Which is great. So, you had mentioned some about the computer tech in that Buffy deals with in the book. How did you, like, are you a techie yourself? You know, did you have to talk to somebody about all the hackage that happened?
So I wrote the book, and there were large sections that would just say, Buffy does something clever with a computer here. And then I sent it to my friends who are actual techies and know what the hell they're talking about. And they told me what the clever thing was.
That's awesome.
because there was no way. I can fake virology because I love to study it. It is something I am actually passionate about. So even if I'm not a professional, as long as I'm not trying to write professionals speaking to other professionals, I can fake it well enough. Politics, I watched 7 seasons of The West Wing in about 6 weeks.
Oh boy.
And it is remarkable how much like an Aaron Sorkin character you will start talking if you do that. But technology, you have very hard, very clear yes-no answers. Does this work? Yes or no. So I wasn't going to fake that. It wouldn't have been fair when everything else in the book was something I was either able to fake or able to avoid.
Sure.
Yeah, as somebody who works with that kind of stuff all the time, yeah, I didn't notice any like glaring problems with any of the technology in there.
Thank you.
Yep. Excellent. And do you read your own books after they're published?
I do.
Oh.
Well, you have to. I read the books at least 5 times while I'm writing them because of the revision process. Then I read them again in what's called copy edits to make sure that there are no mistakes. Because you have typos. This word is spelled wrong. This sentence, no verb. And then you have what we call redos, which I have read this sentence so many times that I'm just filling in the word the that needs to be there. And I no longer realize there's a missing word.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I've had that happen. Eddie proofreads for me at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then I read it again in what's called page proofs, where they've already put everything together. It looks like a book now. And that's kind of the first time I get to read it as a book and see where things fall on the page and see how everything hangs together. And then I read everything once it's actually published, because it's almost like a religious experience for me. I started reading before I was in kindergarten. I was that annoying kid who other kids' moms told them, well, why can't you read? Shannon's always got her nose stuck in a book. Because Shannon's a sport of nature, Mom. Where did you learn that phrase? Shannon taught it to me. You know, I did. I taught biological sport to the other kids in my kindergarten, so they would stop yelling at me, and that had the opposite effect.
Nice.
And it's really interesting for me how things hit me differently emotionally in the different stages. It's part of why I still read paper rather than switching to an ebook format, because there is an emotional weight to having a book in my hand and turning the page and seeing what happens that I don't find reading it on the computer. Really good fiction can make me cry, can make me laugh, can do all of that no matter what format I find it in. But it hits me the hardest in an actual book in my hand. And I want to experience that. And I knew that I had done what I needed to do for me with Feed. If not anyone else, I could have disappointed the whole rest of the world. I still didn't know whether I would or not. But when I started just crying hysterically on the train at a certain point in Feed, and I'm like, the non-reptile part of my brain is going, you can't be crying. You wrote that. You know what happens. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't want this to happen. You know, So I'm very fond of rereading. I also have to reread when it's a series because, so when I was a kid, I always thought that authors who got things wrong about their own worlds were being lazy. Like, if I can remember that Susan's mother has blue eyes, why did the author mess it up and say that she has gray eyes in book 5? My God, he said it right there in book 1.
Of course.
And exactly. And I didn't realize that it was a matter, again, of scale. There is so much I have to keep in my head about each of these worlds that some things that are important still kind of get translated into being little details. Middle names, eye colors, dates of birth. They're important. They matter. But I'm really way more interested in remembering who just got shot. So I have to go back and reread to make sure that things that shouldn't change don't change.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your fan base is probably also right on top of anything, you know, any of the details that may or may not have changed, like, through the process. So.
That's part of why I'm so scrupulous. I write urban fantasy under my own name. I write the October Day series of urban fantasy novels. and they're first person because I do love first person. It's a weakness. And they were my first books. And I kept getting email from people that had no reason to trust me going, you have a continuity error. You got this wrong. This is a mistake. There's an error on page 23. And I'm just sitting there going, no, there's really not. None of the things you have cited are mistakes. Read book 2. Okay, great. Read book 3. Great. And now we've hit the point where they actually trust me. Mm-hmm. But they're only able to trust me because I've made sure that nothing actually was an error.
Right.
You know, if I say something that doesn't make sense, it's intentional. I get to go a lot more into the medical tech in Deadline, which you know, because you've actually read it, and
Yep.
No spoilers, but a little bit of med tech spoiler. I had a couple people write me about feed and go, I have big problems with the part where you keep claiming the Kellis-Amberley virus has never mutated. Even a genetically engineered virus will mutate. All viruses mutate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, la la la, look a bunny.
Yep.
And that actually does get dealt with in Deadline. You have people flat out saying, you know, I know you're not a doctor, but did you never think it was kind of weird that every other virus you've ever heard of mutates and Kellis-Amberley is always the same?
Yep. Whisker's got this like big spoiler cloud on top of his.
No, I'm being very careful.
Unfortunately, I'm sort of like high functioning autistic, and no matter how careful you are, I'm like a super genius when it comes to figuring out plots ahead of time. So I just tuned you out. I'm sorry.
I applaud you and your super genius. I really do. I actually really like it when people go, "Oh my God, I so figured that out," because it means that I did it right.
Yeah, it's fun.
As opposed to things where you're like, okay, so really?
Now, something that I've always found really fascinating is somewhat related to that is the fact that something like a 1/12 of the human genome is actually leftover pieces from former retrovirus infections in humans.
Oh yeah, our genome is made up remarkable. We have so much viral DNA in us, and someday we're going to open the wrong plague pit or crack open the wrong fossil, and all of that is going to wake up, and the entire human race is going to melt. It's going to be awesome.
Zombie apocalypse.
Zombie apocalypse.
Heck yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are parasitic genes. We have genetic material that just kind of gets dumped on us by viruses that don't want to die out. They've recently discovered an entire parasitic genome, which is both the best thing and the most proof that nature hates us. You know, we're not people. We're sacks of virus support.
It's great.
That's awesome. Very cool.
I'm fascinated with doing like artificial life programs and AI experiments and that sort of thing as a coder. And I just like any of that sort of idea that there's this little piece of self-replicating information and there's just a chunk of it that kind of got left behind, and through hundreds and hundreds of generations, it's still just sitting there, and all you have to do is tap into this bite of it and that bite of it, and it wakes right back up. It's great.
It's kind of the fascinating danger of genetic experimentation that we all put our hands over our ears and go, la, 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 I don't hear you about, because we don't know what a lot of these genes do. We're going to flip the wrong switch, and again, we're all going to melt, which is great. I think is great. My friends don't think it's so great, and they wish I wouldn't talk about it at dinner, but...
But it's the best topic.
They would probably be really glad if I would go back to that as dinner table conversation, actually, because right now I'm on a parasite kick.
Nice.
And the clean earth hypothesis does not go over well with pot roast. They're like, Shannon, that's awesome. Tapeworms, yay.
Tapeworms are
look,
awesome.
Tapeworms are great.
Yeah. I have a story, but I don't know how realistic it is.
I heard about one that was in a bar. It was living in the tap where the beer comes out through.
Oh.
It's like, oh no, I don't want to hear
What
that.
species?
I don't know. I don't even know if it's real. It's just something I heard.
No, you could do that, but a human tapeworm would have real issues with that environment. The pH would be bad.
You can hear like getting her brain just like is like flipping pages in books that she's read, getting ready for this parasite cap.
I'm writing a book about parasites right now, so
awesome.
It's my next Mira Grant project is a duology about parasitism and the good hygiene hypothesis. Because nobody ever needed to invite me to dinner again.
And it's interesting. So you write a lot of but urban fantasy novels as Shannon McGuire, your actual name, and you have Mira Grant for the Speed series, and I guess now the Parasites as well.
Yeah, for the medical science fiction, really.
Okay, and then is that something you wanted to do, or was that something that like your publisher said, yeah, we're going to change your name?
My publisher has actually been really chill about some of the crazy crap I've wanted to do. And it was a mutual decision to make Mira Grant. And the reason is, do you remember when Disney opened Touchstone back in the early 1990s?
Whisker probably
Vaguely, yeah.
Vaguely, yeah. So they opened Touchstone. They created this second company that everyone knew completely publicly was owned and operated by Walt Disney. That it's a Disney Corporation film imprint. And the reason was Walt Disney Presents Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Disney has spent decades building a brand that says you can take your children to this. It may be PG-13, some adult supervision may be required, but at the end of the day, you can take your children to this. It's safe.
Right.
We are Disney. We're here to take your money, but we're not here to make you pay for therapy. My books is me. They're urban fantasy. I've got some paranormal romance. There is swearing, there is sex, there is death, but it's none of it worse than you could see on the CW on a Thursday night. I have a lot of teenage fans, and I had a lot of teenage fans even by the time we sold Feed. And, Mira Grant outsells me, which is fairly impressive. I spent a lot of time swearing at her because, bitch doesn't even exist.
Right.
And she goes, yes, we know. You get her sales. Shut up. But I would be perfectly comfortable handing a copy of Rosemary and Rue, which is my first book as Shannon, to any 14-year-old whose parents have told me they like to read or who've told me themselves that they like to read. I would not make that decision for someone else's kid with Feed. And I did not want to, I actually really hoped they'd let me have a pseudonym because I did not want to create a situation where somebody who read Shannon and liked Shannon picked up Feed because it was by Shannon and had no psychological distancing on the cover and then got upset at me. And as it stands, it happens enough to reaffirm my belief that I made the right call. I get not as much as I do right now, not as much because I don't have a brand new book out. But anytime I have a book come out, I get about 2 or 3 emails a week for the first month or so going, oh my God, I love your Toby books and I picked up this book and it's full of zombies. Or, oh my God, I love your zombie books and I picked up this book and did you know there are icky fairies in it? And I'm like, yes, I knew that.
I wrote it.
I wrote it. I did have one person write to tell me that my publisher had inserted fairies into Rosemary and Rue, which entertained me and my friends for weeks because we kept trying to figure out how the hell the book would work without the fairies. Since the plot hinges on them, it'd be kind of like saying that someone had inserted zombies into Feed.
Just like
that. How does this
edit? Yeah.
How does this book work if you take the zombies out? And we did eventually decide that the book didn't work. There was no way to do it, but we had a really good time. Like going, okay, maybe it's a Maltese Falcon thing, and no, that doesn't work.
That's great. Wait, did you know there's zombies? Yes.
Oh my God.
I think that consumers of media don't really understand how much of that kind of shenanigans goes on by folks that produce this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Now, I have had no publisher shenanigans, really. My publishers have been fantastic with me. It helps that thus far the books are selling pretty well, so they are inclined to continue being fantastic. But when I went to my agent and said, "Hey, Diana, I want to sell a set of political, medical, science fiction thrillers with zombies. They're about blogging." Her reaction was not, "Honey, go back to work," but was instead, "Okay, let's find out." And the publishers were like, "Yeah, we want to do this just like you wrote it." So that was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. And actually, I have to say, you are kind of the inspiration for the Zombie Tech podcast.
Yay!
Because we were like, this is actually a really flipping brilliant idea to, one, have a world that's actually post-zombie apocalypse, and two, that the bloggers are the ones who people go to news for, not, these big bad corps, and that they're actual humans who make their, have like a conscience about how they and a reason for like their posts and all that. And
what kicked it over for me was the understanding that a zombie apocalypse can be such a perfect metaphor for approaching some of the more difficult topics of human behavior and how technology can make our lives much better, or it can make them much worse, and how you choose which technologies to build your civilization around are some of the most important decisions that humans can make. And on this show, we're talking mostly to engineers, hackers, and those kinds of people. And these are the folks that would be responsible for rebuilding. In the event that anything goes wrong. And zombie apocalypse is an excellent metaphor. It could be anything. It could be nuclear fallout. It could be
hurricane.
Just some sort of people are dying left and right, or a hurricane, or any sort of natural disaster. Mm-hmm. These are the folks that show up. And these are the folks that are right there to get stuff done. These are the ham radio operators and the scientists of the world. And it's sometimes so hard for them to be heard because they never get more than just a soundbite, Right. We interviewed Joe Grand 2 weeks ago, and he's this hacker guy in your area, actually, San Francisco. And it's been on a TV show called Prototype This on Discovery. And we spent a lot of time talking about how it's so difficult to create programming for the general audience that still includes the science.
Oh, yeah.
So on our show, using that zombie apocalypse as a metaphor, which, you're the one who inspired that element of this, has just made it so much easier to be able to talk about even the most technically advanced stuff in a very easy to understand context for people. It's great.
Well, the thing about the zombie apocalypse that I think almost everyone realizes, but we all kind of go, la, 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 that's not happening. We're just not going to think about that, is it is a socially acceptable way to talk about really hard things right now. What happens if the dead start to rise and you are faced with a choice between save yourself, definitely, save yourself and your loved one who is right there with you, maybe, save yourself and your loved one who is not right there with you, absolutely not. It lets us talk about, do you go back? How do you share out the water? Who is more important to feed in that kind of a crisis? And there are plans. The Department of Defense has plans for zombie defense.
Really?
How do we? Oh yeah,
literally zombies.
Literally zombies, because how the hell else do you explain having a battle plan that involves mowing down several hundred American citizens? Yeah, zombies makes it okay. Yeah. And it is an important thing to know how to do, because there are other things that could happen. There are other situations that could arise. The CDC, have you read the CDC's zombie preparedness plan?
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you if you inspired that.
I don't know that I inspired it. I did get a call warning me that it was going to come out because it was going to explode my inbox, and it in fact did. Everyone in the world, I think, sent me the CDC disaster preparedness plan. That is not as much of an exaggeration as I would like to think.
We're starting to get some of that mail too.
Yeah. And the thing is again, work of genius.
Yeah.
Because if I say to the average, not a disaster planner, not someone who enjoys this, how is your earthquake preparedness kit? They go, oh, I don't like to think about earthquakes. Oh, that's scary. Mm-hmm. How's your hurricane preparedness kit? Oh, God will never let a hurricane hit here. How's your zombie preparedness kit? Oh, let me tell you, we bought some food. It creates a framework where disaster planning is silly, not scary.
Right.
Even though it is exactly as serious.
Yep.
Planning for a fictional disaster, it opened a dialogue with so many people who, I live in San Francisco. I walk recreationally. I take really long walks, and people go, oh, that's great for your health. And I'm like, yes, that is great for being able to walk home when the earthquake takes out the transit system, and I'm 30 miles from the house, and the cats need fed. Mm-hmm. And the same people that blanch when I say that and get upset at me when I say that think it's hysterical when I make that statement about a zombie apocalypse.
That's a good point.
Yep.
That's a good point.
We get away with talking about so many things on this show that normally we wouldn't, because in that context, everything is sort of approachable.
Oh, yeah. And now, of course, everyone thinks that they're going to survive the zombie apocalypse, but...
Yeah, we've bumped into that a few times, too. It's always fun to come back to somebody saying, well, we're going to survive. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Sadly, I think that America is going to be in a lot of trouble if the zombies ever come.
We're so spread out,
It's not even that. The spread out may be one of the few things that saves us. It's the general cultural lack of respect for quarantine.
Yeah.
We are very conditioned as a people not to be respectful of quarantine. How many movies have you seen about diseases where we're expected to applaud the person that boldly, bravely breaks the quarantine to get back to their loved ones?
True.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a few of those.
It's very much a theme. I do panels on zombie preparedness and zombie survival at science fiction conventions. And one of the questions that I like to ask people is, okay, the virus has been released into this hotel. 1 in 3 people is already infected. It is in the air. It has a 6-day latency period. And we have absolutely no way of testing. We don't know if you're infected or not. It has not left this hotel yet. What do you do? And fully 2/3 of the people I ask that question of say, I run. I get out of this hotel and I run. They have just started the zombie apocalypse. Because the question is, if it's not out of the hotel yet, what do you do? And I think that we're going to have, if something like the zombie apocalypse ever does happen in America, whatever it actually is, whether it's zombies or airborne rabies, a more infectious form of Ebola, anything, you're going to get a lot of people who think quarantine doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, well, it has happened, really. I mean, the influenza epidemic back in, the 20s?
The 1916 flu, which was horrifying. And if you ever want to really scare yourself about why flu is a big deal, take a look at the farmers' almanacs for 1915, 16, and 17. The death toll of the 1916 flu was bad enough that it actually caused a dip in overall national life expectancy.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, it was a terrifying thing. Wow. But that was different. We had people coming home from World War II, and we didn't know that there was a quarantine necessary until it had already started. I'm sorry, I got the year wrong. It's 1918, not 1916. I don't know what I was thinking there.
And that would put it right at the end of World War One.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right at the end of World War One. I'm not a military history buff.
Yep.
We have found the hole. Here is the hole. It is actual history that does not involve diseases. But so we quarantined pretty hard and pretty fast once we knew what was going on. But that came back so hard and so fast. We actually first saw it in America in Kansas. So it would more accurately be the Kansas flu than the Spanish flu.
Thanks,
but
Kansas.
Kansas said no. Whereas Spain, they were a neutral country. They didn't have a news blackout going. So they were like, dude, what the crap? And we all said, oh, it's the Spanish flu. Came from Spain. Spanish lady. Woo! And that was the worst flu pandemic that we had. Because the troop movements, all of that, it really hastened the spread. A better example of failure of quarantine really would unfortunately be HIV.
Sure.
Where we've had a lot of documented instances of people who've been told what it is, how you get it, maybe you have it, going, doesn't matter to me. Mm-hmm. It's not going to hurt me.
I've already got it.
I've already got it, or and therefore, why should I bother to slow the spread? Or I'm an American citizen. We have this very strong, nothing can get me. That's what happened to my grandparents in terms of disease. And really, at this point, no one has really lived through. We're losing the last of the people that lived through the big, fast, flashy viral pandemics. So we don't think of them as being the big deal that they are. I've seen quite a few people sneering at the CDC response to the swine flu, to H1N1, when it cropped up a couple years ago, going, well, that was no big deal. Why did they get so upset? Why did they get so up in arms? I actually had a friend who nearly died of the swine flu. The problem with the swine flu was not that it wasn't a threat. It was that people overreacted to a certain degree and did not take the correct steps, or if they took them while also very loudly taking incorrect steps. I'm going to wash my hands with antibacterial soap. That will not help me not get the pandemic flu. The flu does not care about your antibacterial soap. The flu could give a crap. But getting flu shots really helped, and it slowed the spread. And the speed of response is why it was not such a big deal. It was a bit of a fizzle-out flu. It did not kill nearly as many people as I thought it was going to. I will not say I was disappointed by the lack of loss of life, but I was disappointed in the flu itself. I'm like, really? That's the best you can do?
And so do you get your vaccines?
It depends on what they are. I'm a big pro-vaccinator. I am so pro-vaccine. It is difficult to express how pro-vaccine I am. Though smallpox is kind of my go-to illustrator. In that when smallpox, which was our first vaccination, really was the inoculation that they used against smallpox. At that time, 1 person in 6 died.
That's quite a few.
And a lot of genetic lines would actually have a strong tropism toward smallpox infection. So it wasn't just you and I each have 6 kids and we each lose 1 kid. It was you and I each have 6 kids. I lose 5. You lose 3. And there are 2 other families that lost none at all. When smallpox inoculation was first discovered and we first had a treatment that would work, it was guaranteed to cause smallpox in 1 person out of every 6 that got it.
Jeez.
And
the
so again,
vaccination itself.
Well, it wasn't a vaccination; it was an inoculation. So they were actually
okay.
cutting your arm and pushing smallpox material into the arm,
right,
to cause the immune response. You had women who were at the time the social equivalent of Michelle Obama. You had very respectable, very powerful women tracking down Zebediah Boylston, who was the one doctor in America that was able to perform this process. He was in Boston. They were tracking him down and falling on their knees in the street and saying, I will do anything you want. I will be your whore. Right now in the street, anything you want if you will inoculate my children.
Wow.
And they knew they were signing the death warrant for at least one of their kids, and they didn't care. And I look at the luxury that we have now of saying, I don't want to get my flu shot. I might feel kind of punky the next day. Mm-hmm. And just really wish I had a time machine so I could bring those women forward to start punching people. So I'm very, very pro-vaccination. I do get my vaccinations. I try to limit myself to one flu shot a year for, I think, perfectly reasonable reasons.
Yep.
So I will wait to see what the flu strains are and what we're predicting. Mm-hmm. And so I've had a couple years where I didn't get my flu shot. I think that's kind of important too, if it's not a really vicious strain coming through, because you want to keep your immune system responsive.
Right.
I do subscribe to the good health hypothesis and to the hygiene hypothesis, which says that overly reducing your exposure to infectious disease can actually make you more susceptible to infectious disease. It's the theory that says that lack of hookworms is why we have peanut allergies. And so I try to be picky, but I'm also very Pokemon-like in my approach to vaccination. Got to catch them all. I have been vaccinated against smallpox. That was really hard to convince anyone to do. But I think it's important, and I kind of find the anti-vaccination hysteria rage-inducing on a very primal level.
Sure.
There's a lot of talk about it in the autism spectrum community, especially.
So I have OCD. I was diagnosed at the age of 9. That is an autism spectrum disorder.
Mm-hmm. Is it now?
It is. It always has been, actually.
High-functioning autistics are... we're always very fascinated by who of you is also included in our little club.
No, OCD is considered autism spectrum. It has varying levels of function. I'm an extremely high-functioning OCD. I'm numiastic. I'm fascinated by numbers. I'm also fascinated by facts, as witness, let's go off on pandemic flu. Woo! And I believe in doing my research. And I've read every study connecting vaccination to autism. And I've found just way too many of them were paid for. Way too frequently it's the science is following the result rather than the result following the science. Mm-hmm. And autism...
There's a lot of the cure bee column are responsible. For those of you who don't know, I mean, obviously a lot of you do, but for those of you who don't know, there's this sort of mostly parents of autistics. They're seen as this sort of victim here, sheep, just standing around with a lot of money, and anyone who can come up and sell them snake oil, they'll buy it up. And due to that, there's this whole debate going on about vaccinations, and there's all these fake studies and all of these companies that are willing to say, we can link it or we can't link it, so let's do this or whatever. They all have motivations. They
really do. And there's also, so to go back to my hobby horse from way back, well, less than way back in this conversation, there's connection between the hygiene hypothesis and autism. They're connecting everything to the rise of autism. I think part of the rise of autism is that we're testing for it earlier. Mm-hmm. And we're not just testing the kid who sits in the corner and doesn't communicate with the outside world at all.
I think that's very clear to people our age. I think it's less clear to parents who are just being introduced to the topic at this point in history, having grown up in a period of time where you weren't autistic, you were, shy.
Yes, you were shy.
Yeah, whatever.
You were awkward. I was considered socially awkward and really discouraged to pursue math by people who thought that girls shouldn't do math. At this point, I actually have the math to go into the epidemiology programs, but at the time I didn't because I'd been told girls don't do those classes. And my form of numism, I don't show my math because I don't know how. I can do and was doing calculus in 3rd grade, but I couldn't show you my math, so everyone assumed that I was a girl. I had to be cheating.
Good God.
Well, show your work is hard if you don't know how you're doing it.
Sure.
I think that most of the people who claim a connection between autism and vaccination are out to make a buck. They're out to exploit the parents. And as someone who, again, I was diagnosed at 9. I was almost certainly, from behavioral patterns, expressing my particular form of OCD much earlier than that. I would so rather have OCD and the life I have and be the person I am than be dead of measles. That's not even a question.
Yeah.
And the curate people, maybe if you could have cured me at the age of 2, sure, I would not be me. Mm-hmm. I would be a completely different person now, because who you are is made up of who you are. Mm-hmm. But if someone said today, hey, we're going to cure your OCD, my response would be, no, thank you. There's a door. Yeah. Go out it. You know, it's this amazing arrogance that says everyone must want an answer and a magic bullet. We're the way we are for reasons.
Right.
Yeah, as evolved creatures in general, I mean, we are well suited to do well in the environment in which we evolved in, and because we've changed so much about it, we're causing a lot of our biggest problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, there is really strong indicators that we need autism. And we need OCD. We need all of these things. Schizophrenia exists because one copy of the schizophrenia gene makes you a brilliant innovator. 2 copies makes you talk to things that aren't there and possibly get into large arguments with hat stands. But the gene itself persists because we need it. And because we really think that autism has a genetic base, clearly we need this for something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm that type of person, and I, do lots of things that people find useful and valuable in society. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, just because I rock a lot doesn't mean I should be exterminated from the gene pool.
Yeah, you are welcome to come over here and rock anytime you like. My cats will probably come over, stare at you with fascination, and start patting you. But that's just kind of what they do in response to movement.
Big mouse? Big mouse?
Can I eat this? Is it going to pet me? Hello? Then again, my cats I have cats that have been bred for smart. I have 2 Maine Coons and a Siamese. And they find anyone that will do things like rock a lot fascinating because it's something to examine. Alice has figured out air. We're very proud of her. She has figured out that humans need to breathe. So if you were to come and spend the night and she wanted you to be playing with her at 2 a.m., she would actually put her paws over your nose and mouth and press down.
Oh my gosh.
Because the lack of air will eventually cause you to wake up. And then she'll be, susceptible. You'll be open to suggestion.
Oh my gosh. That's a smart cat you got there.
Yeah, it's occasionally a little upsetting how smart a cat I've got there. She tries to kill things on a regular basis. She actually tried to kill her baby brother by holding his head underwater. And we all kind of, Alice, that's some awesome deductive reasoning you've got going there, sweetheart. Yay! Let's not.
I find it highly appropriate that a author of Feed would own a cat that had such inclinations. It's appropriate.
Yeah, she is kind of homicidal. I also own a machete collection, but
nice.
That it's useful. Although it's why people should never prank me with pizzas.
Prank you with pizzas? How does that work?
I was on Twitter, and I said that I was hungry and I wanted a pizza.
Oh,
and one of my friends, good friend, love him dearly, said, I will send Shannon a pizza and it will be funny. And he paid for the pizza, so that wasn't a problem. The problem was that I was home alone.
Oh, no.
In my semi-rural neighborhood, and the doorbell rang at almost 9 o'clock at night. And I'm a woman who watches a lot of horror movies. So I was not going to answer that door undefended. Yeah. And thank God it turned out that the pizza boy was a Resident Evil fan, because when I opened the door in my camo pants and Resident Evil t-shirt with a machete in my hand, he did dance off the porch rather rapidly, but then he thought it was funny. Whereas I think that some pizza people might have actually brought assault charges against me just for waving the machete. They would have lost, but it would have been awkward to explain to the judge.
Oh, man. Well, we'll know not to surprise you with a visit in the middle of the night there.
Surprise pizzas, surprise middle of the night visits, and anything that involves the word surprise and my front door after the sun has gone down is probably a bad plan.
I think you would survive in a zombie apocalypse.
Depends on where I was. But I would like to hope so. I'd also like to brace myself for not, so that I don't get to the afterlife and find everyone I've ever talked to going, so, how'd that survival work out for you, Blondie? Screw you guys.
Speaking of which, Addie has a few questions that she likes to ask every single guest, just to sort of keep a constant thread show to show.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I also have some random questions before, as I always do.
Okay.
Do we have real life zombies now?
Oh, yes.
Who?
Ants.
Oh.
I've heard about these, yes.
There are a lot of random zombies. We have various parasitic and fungal infections that will take over bugs and drive them like tiny meat cars. There's also a species of parasitic wasp. It parasitizes a subspecies of tarantula that stings the tarantula in such a way as to immobilize the part of its brain that is capable of conscious decision. Not that tarantulas have that much volition on their own, but they've got some. It stings them through their heads, stings them into the brain, and then it lays its eggs in them. And the tarantula, which is now under the control of the wasp, will follow the wasp back to the nest that it has prepared.
What?
Get inside, hunker on down, settle in for the gestation period, and then hang out happily doing its tarantula thing while the baby wasps hatch and devour it.
From the inside out?
Mm-hmm.
From the inside. There's also something. There's a species of parasitic worm that parasitizes crabs. It feminizes male crabs, basically turns them into girls, and causes them to spend their lives taking care of the parasite, protecting the parasite, doing what the parasite wants. Wow. There's even some argument that toxoplasmosis causes a form of zombieism in humans. It's a parasite that invades your brain and makes you really like cats.
Really?
Yes, really.
Wow, I gotta look at this. That's awesome.
Look up toxoplasmosis. It is only dangerous for pregnant women, really, although it can cause blindness if you have an infection that goes horribly wrong, but that's extremely rare.
And it makes them love cats.
It makes you like cats more.
Wow.
It makes rats want to sleep with cats, which leads to some great humorous footage right before the rat gets eaten by the cat in question, which is like, hell no, but you're a snack. So, yes, we have real-world zombies. We do not yet have real-world human zombies, but nature will find a way.
Wow. My gosh. Wait till the wasp, stings our heads and then...
I think that the human zombie infection is more of a mimetic infection.
I don't believe it.
In terms of,
it'll happen.
We have sort of transcended beyond just being biological creatures. We also have a virtual element to us, which is our cognitive state, our neocortex, which is far more developed than in other animals. And because of that, we are susceptible to infections in the thought sense, which are usually called memes.
Yes. You can absolutely roll with a mimetic zombie virus, and that could be a lot of fun. You will kind of have to do something to activate the religious mania section of the brain, I think, or combine it with a biological element, unless you want it to be the boiled frog effect again and just be a very slow overall social change. And we do that. If you want a good example of overall... No, honest, it's always been like this social change. Look at the current standard of feminine beauty. 20 years ago, maybe a little less, when Callista Flockhart was on Ally McBeal and was a size 0, everyone was horrified. Oh my God, she's so skinny. She's going to die. She's just going to keel over during filming one day. And now, if you look at her, she looks normal and everyone else on that show looks immense. Because we have been conditioned to that is what a woman should look like. All of those chicks are going to die day 2 of the zombie apocalypse. They're just going to die. They're going to keel over.
No stores. No fat stores.
They have no fat stores at all. We've bred for centuries to have women that can survive childbirth, that can survive a hard winter, that can give the food to the kids if we have to between harvests. You know, for a very long time, look back at comic book ads in the 1950s and 60s. You still see them going, the size 10 to 14 girl is the physical ideal. And if you don't match that, you need to eat this fattening powder.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Guys won't like me because I'm skinny was a really, really strong thing, even as much as 50 years ago. But it was decided that that wasn't okay anymore, that what people liked, what was attractive, were these absolutely attenuated skeletal bodies. Like, not even just normally skinny, because you get women that are naturally skinny, but underfed. And now, if you ask people what's pretty, oh, skinny girls are pretty. Well, why? Because no one would ever want to sleep with a fat girl. Well, go back 100 years, that skinny girl is not getting any dates at all.
No
and that has been
hips.
Exactly. And that has been a mimetic adjustment. That's something the media has done one step at a time. Because
so in that sense, I'm saying that we do have human zombies to all from a if you zoom out and think of our brains as the environment and these ideas as the viruses, then we have, you know, almost everything about us at this point in our development is just this zombie infection that spreads from one group to another, and they're always battling back and forth.
Yeah. So the urban legend is the antibody.
I'll have to think about that.
Dead silence follows. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're done here. Okay.
No, I'll have to think about that. I was just thinking, though, maybe the internet is the rise of the zombie apocalypse.
It may well be.
May well be.
We can spread information very, very fast, and unfortunately, humans like shiny things just as much as anyone. I can make my cats chase the laser pointer up and down the hall for hours. They know there's nothing to catch, but they'll still keep chasing it because it's shiny.
Yep.
And so we fall for get-rich-quick schemes and Nigerian scams and people who want to buy our cars and have them shipped to England.
Yep. So I have a quick question. It just came to mind. One, two questions, I guess. One, is there any movie planned for Feed?
There has as yet been nothing announced.
Oh.
That's actually my response, whether there is something or not, because I'm not supposed to say whether there's something, but I don't like lying to people. So there's always, as yet, nothing announced.
Okay. And then if you had to pick actors and actresses for Georgia, Buffy, and Sean, who would they be?
In my perfect world of sunshine and zombie puppies, where I get to do the casting, I would actually want Allison Scagliotti, who plays Claudia on Warehouse 13 for Georgia.
Yep.
Jason Doring, who was Logan on Veronica Mars.
Okay.
Would be my ideal Sean. If they didn't make the movie in the next year or two, he'd be getting a little old, but he still plays young enough to take the role, and he is who I was picturing when I was writing the part.
He's got a baby face, so it's
he does. He really has a baby face, and this one's a little bit of a hard sell for most people. But I would want Jeanette McCurdy for Buffy.
Jeanette McCurdy.
There's a show on Nickelodeon called iCarly.
Yep.
And she plays Sam, the somewhat violent blonde best friend.
I agree with that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, she's a really good actress. I've seen her in things other than iCarly, and she plays broad for the show, but she's actually a really good actress, and she can deliver technobabble believably. Which is how anyone that's not a techie is going to look at the kind of things Buffy would have to say.
Yep.
But the problem, I do DSL tech support. I used to do DSL tech support. I haven't in a couple of years, and I was hired because I was really good at talking to people on the phone, not because I was technical. And they were like, "We can teach you to say the correct combination of technical things to fix the computer. We cannot teach you to actually know how to talk to people on the phone." Well, Jeanette McCurdy can look like a total freaking airhead. And that, I think, is harder to teach to a really technical actor than how to say, don't worry about it, we're just going to reboot this, and we're going to update that, and we're going to do this, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So Jeanette McCurdy.
Awesome.
It's kind of a shame that Sarah Michelle Gellar and therefore myself, as we're the same age, are now old, because how funny would it be to actually be able to use her?
I would actually love to have Christy Swanson, who played the original Buffy in the movie, play Stacey Mason, which is Sean and George's adoptive mother.
That would be a fun nod, yeah.
That would make me happy.
Well, you never know. Send the book. They might actually...
Unfortunately, authors don't usually get to do too many things like that, unfortunately.
No, we lack that power, which is tragic in part because everyone assumes we have that power. So I regularly get people emailing going, why haven't you made a movie yet? Well, I don't have a movie production studio and no one's bought the rights, so that would be why. Why can't I have book 3 yet? Well, because I finished writing it last month, and despite your belief that the new ebook revolution means that you should have it the second I type the end, no.
Technology is very powerful. It's not that powerful, folks.
Well, also, if it were, I honestly, even if it were, I would still stick to the publishing schedule I have, because the book that takes you 2 days to read takes me a minimum of 8 months to write. Mm-hmm. I'm a fast reader, too. I respect and applaud your reading speed. But if I tried to write any faster, it would very quickly become Dick and Jane versus the zombie apocalypse. See Dick, seroconvert. Seroconvert, Dick, seroconvert.
And there's a child's book there with little illustrations and everything.
It'd be fun.
All right, so now I actually get to the questions I ask everybody.
Yay!
What 3 tools would you take to your zombie apocalypse bunker?
What kind of zombie?
This should be interesting because almost everybody else that we've talked to is usually somebody who likes to build things for fun or that sort of thing. But this will be a little different, I think.
What kind of zombies are they?
Let's assume they're the same ones as what's in your book.
So we're actually talking about viral zombies.
Yep.
What is your definition of tool?
Whatever you make it out to be.
Yeah, people take it to mean different things. That's usually what makes it interesting, is that it reveals a lot about a guest on how they decide to answer this.
Well, is a roll of duct tape in and of itself a tool, or can I say a hot room construction kit is a tool?
You can do a hot room construction kit.
So I would be taking with me a hot room construction kit, which consists of my current hot room construction kit. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I keep one in my closet, and that's why one day Homeland Security is going to come for me. Consists of 16 rolls of industrial-grade cling film. It's not saran wrap. It's much thicker than that. It's necessary. 5 rolls of duct tape, a bottle of formalin. Do not keep this in your closet unless you know how to keep formalin. You will die. 5 bottles of bleach.
Wow.
And 6 cans of compressed air, which you use to test the seams. This is going to be important. You're going to need to be able...
Sounds like a scene out of American Psycho.
Yes, I could probably destroy your body. Come on over. But no, this is actually important because if you are dealing with a viral zombie apocalypse, you want to be able to set up a clean room that you know is clean for a staging and isolation zone. You have to assume that early in, if the apocalypse is happening, you have no test other than time and strip. So you need to have that clean area. You need to have something that you can set up and establish your remote zone with. I'm also going to assume that I'm still in a populated enough area that I'll have DSL service. So I'm going to disconnect, sorry everyone else in my neighborhood, and steal the DSLAM connection box from my local phone pole, which I can then use to get into the business quality DSL download lines. Because I'm going to need to stay, I know, but I'm going to need to stay on the CDC lists. If I'm going to find out what this is and whether I should be politely shooting everyone that has gone into the bunker with me, or we actually have a chance in hell, you know, if it's an airborne rabies apocalypse, I'm very sorry. I'm shooting us all. Those are zombies that can work doors. We're just done.
Yep.
That's not a party. And I'm taking my laptop because honestly, a laptop is a tool.
Yep.
And it is what's going to let me find out what we know about this virus, what we have about the structure. I don't have a full genetics lab kit, or if I did, I would not admit it on something that is essentially the radio. Hello again, Homeland Security. There are things we just don't talk about. And if I did, I would probably take that, but possibly not, because I have to assume that we're in that bunker for a while. And one test tube gets dropped. Everyone that's down there is getting melted.
Yep.
I would rather not melt. So clean room setup, a mechanism for maintaining my internet, and the laptop.
Sounds
Awesome.
good. That is a solid 3 tools, I would say.
I think it's pretty much is up to par with what Jeremy Blum was talking about with his MakerBot.
Yep.
And his ability to recreate a way to grow food using a MakerBot, and the food would double as a source for making corn-based plastic so that he could continue to make things with his MakerBot, so on and so forth.
See, that's awesome, but I would not know how to make a MakerBot go.
Oh, that we can do.
See, but since Jeremy's local, hey, if you're listening, you bring your MakerBot, I'll bring my clean room construction kit and my knowledge of how to actually put a clean room together. And together, we can ride out the zombie apocalypse.
I'm gonna have to send you the GPS coordinates for our zombie bunker.
Yeah, we have an official zombie
apocalypse team.
Yeah, and
well, that's good. Although y'all are in Minnesota,
you think
which can be a good thing.
It can be a good
depends on
thing.
what kind of zombie.
Depends on what kind of zombie and when the apocalypse starts, because I'm very sorry, but if it's go out in below freezing weather or be eaten by the dead, I may hesitate long enough that you have to leave me. I have lived on the West Coast too long.
Well, we'll be sure to at least provide them, and if you decide that San Fran is a little too
Earthquake prone,
yeah, then
full of zombies,
yeah. Then just come on over our way.
Okay, will do.
Standing invitation.
Thank you. I'll bring the plastic.
All right. I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode. We ran a little bit long, but the listeners, I'm sure, will not mind at all. So, is there anything that you would like to plug before we're done here?
I've got Blackout coming out in May, which is the 3rd Newsflash book. There's actually going to be a limited edition hardcover of Countdown, which is the novella set during the Rising itself, coming out from Subterranean Press in 2012. And my friend Peter Kleins has just put out his 2nd zombie novel, Expatriates, which is a sequel to Ex-Heroes. And it is the first time I have seen zombie apocalypse in a superhero universe done right.
Cool. Very cool. And actually, if you guys want to check out her website, which you have many.
I do.
There's ShannonMcGuire.com.
Yep.
And Mira Grant. Oh, go ahead.
If it's SEANAN McGuire, MCGUIRE.com. That is your best starting point because it is linked to MiraGrant.com in multiple places and has a full bibliography, which I find helpful because otherwise I forget when stuff is coming out.
Yeah. And I mean, you've written like a crap ton. You've just written a lot of stuff. And, and we didn't mention this, although it is a very big deal, but Feed actually was nominated for the Hugo Awards. Yep, this year.
I came in 2nd.
But you know what? Nomination is just as hardcore awesome.
For a serious zombie novel? Oh my god.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That was mind-blowing. Yep. My mind is still kind of blown.
So, I mean,
We didn't want to talk too much about it because the vote was so close that I'm sure it stings.
No. It really was. If the vote had been wider, I would have been like, oh, well, will of the people. As it was, the vote was like, I only needed to kill 25 of them, which I am told is not a social response.
In the world of Feed, anything goes.
Woo! But no, I was very, very honored, and honestly, losing to Connie Willis is kind of like, and then Isaac Asimov kicked my ass, so you don't really have any shame there. It was a very good showing, and I'm very, very pleased and very, very grateful for everyone that voted.
Yep.
If you're gonna get beat, you might as well get beat by a giant.
Exactly. And there are the people where it's like, I'd be happy to lose, just not to you. Thankfully, there were none of those on the ballot this year, but there are past ballots that I've looked at and been like, wow, if my book lost to that, I would be really sad. So sad.
You mentioned Twitter earlier. Where can people follow you?
I have both Shannon McGuire and Mira Grant on Twitter. I recommend following Shannon if you're curious, because Mira doesn't really log into Twitter very often on account of she doesn't exist, and my client gets a headache when I try to tweet from both places.
There you go.
My Twitter feed is, as a warning, mostly about writing, cute things my cats did, horrible things I've done to my coworkers, and the latest large bug the cat released in the house, which is not cute.
Did you catch it?
No, but the cat did leave its head on my pillow the next morning because he knew I was upset.
Pleasant.
Yeah. If you're curious, go on to Google and look up Jerusalem cricket in the image search. You may hate me immediately thereafter.
As for myself and Addie, you can find all our stuff at tymkrs.com. Same thing on Twitter at tymkrs. And this podcast can be found every Thursday at zombietech.tv. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.